Let me tell you how I prepare for any surveillance case in less than an hour. Preparing for your surveillance case is quite possibly the #1 productivity enhancing activity you can do to ensure your surveillance is successful. I have known a lot of private investigators that just get up when the alarm clock rings at dark 30 in the morning, grab their camera, then head out the door where the only plan in mind is to get to the surveillance site as quickly as possible, then figure out what is going on. And to be truthful, when I first got started doing surveillance, I often followed this routine myself. I was so busy working 6 to 7 days a week, covering 3 to 4 cases a week, I just thought that was the best way to do it. And well, I must admit, I was wrong in my thinking back then, and here is why I was wrong. After a while of working cases like this, I started getting the cases mixed up in my mind. I would remember details about one case, but be working on another case that was entirely different. I also would forget where I was in a case. Is this a 2-day case? Is this a 3-day case? Is this a spot check? Did I schedule the right amount of time to do the job? Am I out too early, too late? And the mind-boggling questions just kept coming. Now, I was able to sort it all out, but man, I'll tell you what, the early morning mental fog created by getting up every morning at 4 or 4:30, heading out and hoping it would all work out was getting to me. Now, one thing I am definitely not confused about is the need for insurance for private investigators. And if you would like more information about that, then check out this video's sponsor. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. Then I realized I was spending so much time prepping for a case while on the case, sorting through the details in the darkness of the wee hours of the morning, that it was affecting the outcome of my surveillance. I was sitting there on surveillance, turning on my interior lights to double check this, double check that, and running my laptop or looking at my phone to make sure I knew what vehicles I was looking for, what my subject looked like, how many kids he had, and all that jazz. And that led to me being noticed by neighbors and other people, including the subject of my investigation, a lot more than I preferred to be noticed. So I decided, as painful as it seemed at the time, I needed to make a preparation plan to ensure I was prepared for every case before I ever went out on surveillance, and I still use that same plan today. The first thing I decided to do was to create a cover sheet for every case that I got. Even if it was a simple 4-hour spot check, I was going to make that cover sheet. That cover sheet consists of the subject's name, address, phone number, any photos I have of the subject, the case summary, and any information provided to me about the subject or that I gathered during my pre-surveillance preparation. I actually make the cover sheet before I start any research on the subject. This way I have all of those details provided right in front of me while I do the research. Then I start my research on the subject using the information the client provided. I will usually run a quick report on one of my paid databases on the subject to see if there is anything like criminal history I need to know about, as well to double check the provided address and to get vehicle information. As I review this data, I enter any relevant data I see into the cover sheet, like vehicle, make, model, year, color, license plate. I also look at other registrants of those vehicles so I know who else may be driving the vehicle that's associated with the subject. If the subject has a criminal history, I make note of that too in my cover sheet. Does he have a lot of speeding tickets? Does he have drug charges, DUIs, or any violent offenses? These things may very well dictate how I set up stationary surveillance and how I conduct mobile surveillance as well if I need to ask the client for additional resources like a second investigator. Then I run a quick Google search on the subject with their first and last name in quotes, like quote Bob Smith, quote, and then the city they live in. Now, if they have a real common name and they live in a large city, this may produce a lot of data about people other than your subject. But if they have a unique name or live in a smaller community, it can produce a lot of great intel. I will also run a search for my subject's name, again in quotes, with their spouse's name in quotes next to it, like quote Bob Smith, quote Mary Smith, quote. This will give me results of searches where both names are present. One thing I keep an eye out for when I do these quick searches are social media sites like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and others where I may be able to get a photo of the subject and an idea of their likes, dislikes, and activities. If I know an employer, current or past, I will also search the subject's name in quotes with the employer's name after that. Many times I will find a photo of my subject that way too. I try to spend less than 15 minutes doing this quick OSINT, open source intelligence investigation, on my subjects. You have to be careful. You are not running down every rabbit hole you see and just looking for the most valuable intel like photos. Then I hop onto Google and I type in the subject's address, and I look at two primary things. The first is the map section. I want to see what the residence looks like and what the neighborhood and the neighborhood roadway network looks like. When I get to the first map, I take a good look at the street the address is located on, and I zoom out a little and I look at all the roads, the arterials, the collectors, and other main roads to get a good idea of how traffic may flow in and out of the neighborhood. Then I go to the satellite view of the map and I look at things like where cars park on the street around the subject's address. I am also looking for neighborhood stores, nearby shopping areas, and schools where the subject may go. Then I drop down into the street view and I get a good look at the residence itself, and I do a drive-through, if you will, in the street view to look for good vantage points where I might establish stationary surveillance when I get there. Keep in mind, though, that everything you see in these maps is historical intel. Everything may be the same when you get on scene, but in most cases it will be different. Even the color of the house may have changed. One big thing I look for is a good vantage point at a distance where I might park down the street a few blocks or around the corner on another block and then go on foot surveillance when I first arrive. I like to do that in most cases so I have a good idea of what cars are present and a good idea of where I might set up stationary surveillance. The next big thing I look for in that Google search of the address is for those for sale listings. If I can find my subject residence in one of those from the past, I can get a good idea of the house layout, where the bedrooms are, where the kitchen is, and other helpful intel. I also look to see if there are any houses for sale in the immediate vicinity of the subject address. Sometimes these are great places to park in front of, especially if they are vacant. I also make sure I include in that cover sheet an overview of the neighborhood with the location of the residence on the map, showing major roadways, highways, freeways, just in case my GPS doesn't work properly and I need to rely on that to get me there. Now that I have all of this intel and I have the pertinent parts placed in my cover sheet, I print that cover sheet out the night before I am scheduled to go out on the surveillance. Yes, I still take a printed cover sheet with me on every case. I have learned the hard way to never trust that I will have access to files on the cloud. I also have a checklist of other prep tasks I conduct the night before I go out on surveillance. This list includes putting all of my cameras on chargers. Even if I didn't use the camera recently, I still put them all on the charger. I have 3 primary cameras I always take with me. My main camera, my backup camera, and a covert camera. I also go through all of my cameras and I make sure all old video has been erased off of them, and I double check the date timestamp on them. And I have a designated charging station where I plug everything into the night before I head out. I also make sure I charge my power DC-AC supply the night before too, and I have a couple of LED flashlights I take with me, and those get charged as well. Basically, if it requires power and I plan to take it with me, it goes on the charger the night before. Now, if I have the time, I try to do this. In most cases, I get everything charged in the evening, and then I can get it all put into my surveillance case. I have an equipment box I use to carry all of my surveillance gear like cameras, tripods, and flashlights. This way, when I am ready to go in the morning, I can grab it and I can head out. If you want to check out the surveillance gear that I have, I'll leave a link down below for that. When I get in my car in the morning, before I put it in gear, I quickly go over my checklist and make sure I have everything I will need. Some of the other things I make sure I have is a jacket, an extra shirt, ball caps, my sunglasses, food, water, and all that jazz. Then the first thing I do when I leave is stop and fuel up and wash all of my vehicle's windows. My preference is to do this the day before, but sometimes there just isn't enough time. And if I am driving a long distance to the surveillance location, I will plan extra time to stop near to the surveillance location and fill up there to make sure I have plenty of gas for the day, as well wash my windows. This is almost a necessity in the summertime, as you can just drive 30 miles and have a bug-covered windshield, or even in the winter With snow and slush, it doesn't take much to muck up the windows. Then I head to the spot that I identified where I can park and go out on foot surveillance and inspect the residents, the neighborhood, and the vehicles. I try to avoid driving by the residence if at all possible, and if I have to drive past it, I only want to do that one time while conducting covert surveillance. But if I am working on an overt surveillance case, well, things may be a little different. And I made this video right here that covers that very topic. Now, I want to send a huge shout out to my PI Guy Premium supporters, Eric Hutchinson and Eric Lewis. Thank you so much for your support, my friends. And if you would like information on how you can become a PI Guy supporter, check out the link below or click that join button.